Hello and welcome to Lind, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Settle in, dear listener, for a tale woven from the fog-laden streets of Victorian London, where gas lamps flicker and shadows conceal secrets. This is the account of a grim mystery that drew my friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, into the heart of the East End. A case of a slain soldier, a barracks shrouded in whispers, and a puzzle that tested even Holmes' prodigious intellect. Chapter 1. A Knock at Baker Street. It was a dreary evening in October 1888, and the air in London hung heavy with the damp chill of autumn. The fog, that perennial companion of the city, pressed thickly against the windows of 221B Baker Street, obscuring the world beyond in a shroud of gray. Within our rooms, the fire crackled in the grate, casting a warm, flickering light over the cluttered sanctuary that Holmes and I called home. Books teetered in precarious stacks. Scientific instruments gleamed dully on the sideboard, and the faint, acrid scent of Holmes' latest chemical experiment lingered in the air. I sat in my armchair, nursing a glass of brandy and perusing the evening paper, while Holmes, with his characteristic intensity, bent over a retort bubbling with some noxious precipitate. His long fingers, stained with chemicals, moved with precision, and his sharp gray eyes gleamed with the thrill of discovery. The silence between us was companionable, broken only by the occasional hiss of the gas lamp or the distant clatter of a hansom cab on Baker Street below. It was in this moment of quiet that a sharp, urgent rap at the door shattered the stillness. I glanced at Holmes, who raised an eyebrow but did not pause in his work. Mrs. Hudson, our ever-patient landlady, appeared moments later, her expression one of mild exasperation. "A gentleman to see you, Mr. Holmes," she announced, "and in a right state, if I may say so." "Show him in, Mrs. Hudson," Holmes replied, his voice calm but laced with a sudden alertness. Tightly. "It is a matter of murder, Mr. Holmes," he said bluntly. "One of my men, Private Thomas Eldridge, was found dead this morning in a locked storeroom within the barracks. He was stabbed through the heart, and no weapon was found. The room was secured, the lock intact, and the window barred. No one could have entered or left without detection. Yet, there he lay, dead as stone." I felt a chill that had little to do with the damp air. A locked-room murder was a puzzle to stir even the most jaded mind, and I saw Holmes' eyes gleam with that peculiar intensity that signaled his interest. "A locked room, you say?" he murmured, leaning back in his chair and steepling his fingers. "Most intriguing. Pray, continue, Captain. Omit no detail, however trivial it may seem." Harrow took a deep breath as if steeling himself. The East End Barracks, as you may know, is a fortress of sorts, built to house soldiers returning from campaigns abroad. It is a place of discipline, of order. Yet these past 3 months have been plagued by unease. Eldridge is the third man to die under mysterious circumstances. The first, a corporal named Baxter, fell from a parapet, supposedly drunk. The second, Private Malone, drowned in the Thames, though he was known to be a strong swimmer. And now Eldridge, stabbed in a room none could enter. The men whisper of a curse, Mr. Holmes, and I confess, I am at a loss. Holmes' expression remained impassive, but I knew his mind was already racing, sifting through the details. "Describe the scene of Eldridge's death," he said. "The storeroom, the body, the surroundings, everything." Harrow nodded, his brow furrowing as he recalled the grim tableau. "The storeroom is a small chamber in the barracks west wing, used to store surplus equipment, blankets, boots, and the like. It has one door, heavy oak with a single lock, and a barred window too narrow for a man to pass through. The key is kept in my office, well liked. I know of no enemies, but—" He hesitated, his eyes flickering with something unspoken. "But," Holmes prompted, his tone sharp. Harrow sighed. "There were rumors. Eldridge had been asking questions about an incident in India, a matter of regimental funds that went missing. He believed an officer was involved, though he never named names. I thought it mere gossip, but now I wonder if it cost him his life." Holmes leaned forward, his interest visibly heightened. "And the other deaths, Baxter and Malone, were they connected to this incident?" "I cannot say," Harrow admitted. "Baxter was a drunkard, and Malone was reckless. Their deaths were ruled accidents, but after Eldridge, I fear there may be a pattern." Holmes rose abruptly, his movements swift and purposeful. "Watson, fetch your coat and revolver. We depart for the East End at once." He turned to Harrow. "Captain, you will accompany us. I must see this storeroom for myself." Harrow stood, relief mingling with apprehension on his face. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I pray you can bring clarity to this darkness." As we prepared to leave, I glanced at the fog beyond the window, its tendrils curling like specters in the gaslight. The East End was a place of shadows, where danger lurked in every alley, and I felt a prickle of unease. Yet with Holmes at my side, I knew no mystery, however grim, was beyond unraveling. We descended to the street, where a hansom cab awaited, its horse stamping impatiently in the damp. The driver, muffled in a scarf, tipped his hat as we climbed aboard. The cab lurched forward, carrying us into the heart of London's fog-choked labyrinth, toward a barracks where death had struck with silent precision. Chapter 2. Into the East End. The hansom cab rattled through the fog-choked arteries of London, its wheels clattering over the uneven cobblestones as we ventured from the familiar warmth of Baker Street into the shadowed heart of the East End. The air was thick with the mingled scents of coal smoke, damp earth, and the faint tang of the Thames. Harrow led us through the barracks' main entrance, a heavy oak door carved with regimental insignia, and into a corridor lit by sputtering gas jets. The air was heavy with the musty scent of old leather and polish, mingled with the faint metallic tang of gun oil. Soldiers in scarlet tunics saluted as we passed, their eyes darting curiously to Holmes, whose reputation, it seemed, had preceded him even here. "This way, gentlemen," Harrow said, his voice low but firm, as he guided us toward the west wing. "The storeroom is just ahead." The corridor narrowed, its walls lined with faded portraits of stern-faced officers and battle scenes from distant campaigns. At its end, a stout door marked Stores stood closed, its iron lock gleaming dully in the lamplight. Harrow produced a key, his hand steady despite the strain in his eyes, and unlocked the door with a heavy click. It swung inward, revealing a cramped chamber no larger than a modest parlor, its air thick with the scent of mildew and dust. The room was as Harrow had described, a single barred window, too narrow for a man to pass through, admitted a sliver of gray light, barely piercing the gloom. Shelves lined the walls, laden with neatly folded blankets, crates of boots and coils of rope. In the center of the floor, a chalk outline traced the shape of a man, its edges stark against the worn planks. Beneath it, a dark stain, Eldridge's blood, had seeped into the wood, a grim testament to the violence that had occurred here. Holmes stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room with the intensity of a hawk. He dropped to one knee beside the chalk outline, his fingers brushing the floor. "Watson," he said, his voice low. "Observe the scuff marks here, radiating from the body. They suggest movement, but not a struggle. Curious." I leaned closer, noting the faint scratches in the dust, barely visible in the dim light. "Could they be from Eldridge's boots as he fell?" I asked. "Possibly," Holmes replied, his gaze shifting to the lock on the door. He produced a small magnifying bars, finding them solid, then sniffed the air near the sill. "Tobacco," he said suddenly. "A faint trace, but distinct. Not a common blend, something richer, perhaps from the colonies." "Did Eldridge smoke?" "No," Harrow replied. "He was particular about his health. Never touched a pipe or cigarette." Holmes' eyes gleamed. "Then we have a clue, however small. The killer, or someone present at the time of the murder, left this scent behind." We moved to the shelves where Holmes' keen eyes darted over every detail. He paused at a crate near the body, its lid slightly askew. With a gloved hand, he lifted it, revealing a stack of folded uniforms, their creases pristine save for a single thread, red, vibrant against the drab cloth, caught in a splinter. "This thread," Holmes said, holding it to the light, "is not from a soldier's uniform. It's silk, finely woven. A gentleman's garment, perhaps, or something more exotic." Harrow frowned. "No one in the barracks wears silk, save perhaps the senior officers, and even then only off-duty." Holmes pocketed the thread, his expression unreadable. "Every detail, Captain, is a thread in the tapestry of truth. We must follow each one, however slender." We left the storeroom, Harrow locking the door behind us, and proceeded to the barracks mess hall, where the quartermaster, Mr. Gibbs, awaited. Gibbs was a wiry man with a nervous demeanor, his fingers twitching as he recounted his discovery of Eldridge's body. "I went to fetch blankets at 6 this morning," he said, his voice thin. "The door was locked, as always. When I opened it, there he was, dead, with that awful look on his face." Holmes' questions were relentless, probing Gibbs' routine, the key's whereabouts, and the barracks' security. Gibbs insisted no one could have accessed the storeroom without the key, yet his eyes avoided Holmes, and a faint sheen of sweat glistened on his brow. "Watson," Holmes murmured as we stepped aside. "Our quartermaster is not entirely forthcoming. His nervousness suggests knowledge. But let go. Such matters can be dangerous." As we left the dormitory, the fog outside had thickened, wrapping the barracks in a ghostly veil. Holmes paused in the courtyard, his gaze sweeping the walls as if they might speak. "This place," he said, "is a crucible of secrets. The locked room, the tobacco, the silk thread, the photograph, all pieces of a puzzle that points to something larger than a single murder." I felt a shiver, not from the cold but from the weight of his words. The East End was a place of shadows, and the barracks, for all its discipline, seemed to harbor darkness within its walls. As we prepared to return to Baker Street, Holmes' voice cut through the fog. "Watson, we must tread carefully. The killer is clever, and the stakes are higher than we know." The cab awaited us, its lantern a faint beacon in the mist. As we climbed aboard, I glanced back at the barracks, its silhouette looming like a sentinel of secrets. Holmes, beside me, was already lost in thought, his mind weaving the threads of evidence into a pattern only he could yet see. Chapter 3. The Soldier's Past. The fog that clung to the East End Barracks seemed to follow us back to the streets of London, its tendrils curling around the hansom cab as we rattled toward Baker Street. The grim scene in the storeroom, the chalk outline, the bloodstain, the faint scent of exotic tobacco, lingered in my mind, as did the photograph of the mysterious E.M. tucked beneath Private Eldridge's pillow. Sherlock Holmes, seated beside me, was silent, his sharp features etched with concentration. His fingers toyed absently with the silk thread he had found, its vibrant red hue a stark contrast to the drab reality of the barracks. Captain Harrow, opposite us, stared out into the mist, his face a study in unease, as if the weight of the murders pressed upon him like the fog itself. Back at 221B Baker Street, the fire had dwindled to embers, but Mrs. Hudson, ever attentive, had stoked it anew. The warmth of our rooms was a welcome contrast to the damp chill of the East End, and I settled into my office along the frontier, earned a commendation for bravery, but he kept his own counsel. After the business with the regimental funds, he grew introspective, as if something weighed on him. Holmes' eyes narrowed. "This business with the funds. Elaborate, Captain. What exactly did Eldridge suspect?" Harrow hesitated, his hands tightening on the arms of his chair. "It was a scandal, hushed up quickly. A sum of money, intended for supplies, went missing from the regimental coffers. Eldridge believed an officer was responsible, though he never named the man to me. He said he had evidence, but I urged him to drop it. Such accusations without proof could ruin a man's career, or worse, or cost him his life," Holmes said sharply. "Did anyone else in the regiment share Eldridge's suspicions?" "Possibly," Harrow admitted. "The men talked, as soldiers do. There were whispers about Major Langley, a senior officer with a reputation for ambition. But nothing was proven, and Langley is a decorated hero. To accuse him without evidence would be folly." Holmes set the photograph on the mantelpiece, his gaze fixed on the initials E.M. "This woman," he said, "may hold the key. Watson, we must return to the barracks to question Eldridge's comrades. Someone must know who E.M. is, and what drove Eldridge to pursue this wrong he spoke of." The next morning the fog had lifted slightly, though the sky remained a sullen gray as we returned to the East End Barracks. The mess hall was a cavernous space, its walls adorned with regimental banners faded by time. Soldiers sat in clusters, their conversations hushed as we entered, their eyes wary. The air smelled of boiled cabbage and strong tea, and the clatter of tin mugs punctuated the low murmur of voices. Holmes, with his usual air of command, addressed the room. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice cutting through the din, "I am Sherlock Holmes, here to investigate the death of Private Thomas Eldridge. I require your cooperation. Who among you knew him well?" His expression remained impassive. "And what of Major Langley?" he asked. "Did Eldridge ever mention him in connection with these funds?" The room grew quieter, the soldiers exchanging glances. Malone's jaw tightened. There were rumors, sir, but nothing solid. Langley's a hard man, but respected. Eldridge was careful not to name names, at least to me. Holmes nodded, dismissing Malone with a wave, and turned to the other soldiers. "Anyone else?" he called. "Speak now, or the truth may remain buried with your comrade." A young private, barely out of his teens, raised a trembling hand. "Private Carter, sir. I saw Eldridge with a letter once, about a month ago. He was reading it in the dormitory, looked upset. Said something about E.M. deserving better, and how he'd make it right for her." Holmes' eyes gleamed. "Did you see the letter's contents, Carter?" "No, sir," Carter replied, his voice faltering. "He stuffed it away when he saw me. But it had a London postmark, I'm sure of it." This was a thread worth pursuing, and Holmes wasted no time. "Captain Harrow," he said, turning to our companion, "I need access to Eldridge's personal effects again. There may be more letters." Harrow led us back to the dormitory, where Eldridge's bunk stood untouched, a silent monument to the fallen soldier. Holmes rifled through the small bundle of letters we had seen before, their envelopes worn but intact. Most were mundane. Notes from a cousin in Kent, a bill from a tailor, but one stood out. Its envelope bearing a London postmark and the same delicate handwriting as the photograph's inscription. Holmes slid it open with a penknife, revealing a single sheet of paper. The letter was brief, written in a feminine hand. "Dear Tom, I beg you to be careful. The truth must come out, but not at the cost of your life. I cannot bear to lose you too. If you must act, do so with caution. I am with you always. Yours, E.M." Holmes handed me the letter, his expression unreadable. A warning, Watson, and a plea. This E.M. knew Eldridge was in danger. She may be our link to the motive. I know who stood to lose if his accusations came to light. Harrow, who had been silent, spoke up. "Mr. Holmes, I fear this may tear the regiment apart. If an officer is involved, the scandal could ruin us all." "Then we must act swiftly," Holmes replied, his voice firm. "The truth, Captain, is a harsh but necessary medicine." As we climbed back into the cab, I felt the weight of the mystery settle over me. Eldridge's past was a tangled web, and the specter of betrayal loomed large. Holmes, beside me, was already lost in thought, his mind weaving the threads of evidence into a pattern I could not yet discern. The cab rolled into the fog, carrying us back to Baker Street, where the next clue awaited. Or so I hoped. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Fog. The gas lamps of Baker Street flickered weakly as Sherlock Holmes and I prepared to venture once more into the labyrinthine depths of the East End. The letter from E.M., with its cryptic warning to Private Eldridge, lay heavy on my mind, its words echoing like a distant, tolling bell. Holmes, as was his custom, revealed little of his thoughts, but the glint in his eyes betrayed a mind afire with the puzzle of the slain soldier. The fog, ever present in this autumn of 1888, had thickened since our morning visit to the barracks, wrapping London in a shroud that seemed to mirror the mystery itself, obscure, elusive, and fraught with unseen peril. Holmes had insisted we return to the East End Barracks under cover of night, a decision that filled me with unease. "The daylight reveals only what men wish to show, Watson," he had said, his voice low and resolute. "The night, however, betrays their secrets." And so, armed with my revolver and a stout overcoat, I followed him into the mist. our hansom cab rattling through streets where the cries of hawkers had given way to the eerie silence of evening. Captain Harrow had returned to his duties, leaving us to our investigation, though his parting words lingered. A warning to tread carefully, for the barracks housed men hardened by war. The barracks' outer wall. Holmes paused, his attention caught by a side gate, its iron bars half hidden by ivy. He knelt, examining the ground, where the mud was churned by recent footprints. Fresh, he murmured, and made by boots not issued to soldiers. See the tread, civilian, likely expensive. Our killer or an accomplice passed this way. Before I could respond, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a cloaked figure darting from the gate into the alley beyond. Holmes saw it too, and without a word he was off, his long coat billowing as he gave chase. I followed, my heart pounding, the fog swallowing us as we plunged into the maze of Whitechapel's back streets. The figure moved swiftly, a shadow among shadows, weaving through alleys so narrow the walls seemed to close in around us. The clatter of our boots echoed, mingling with the distant rumble of a passing omnibus and the occasional shout from a tavern. Holmes, with his uncanny agility, gained ground, his lantern casting wild beams that danced across the damp walls. "Stop," he called, his voice sharp but controlled. The figure hesitated, glancing back, and for a moment I glimpsed a pale face beneath a hood before it vanished around a corner. We pursued, turning into a courtyard hemmed by crumbling tenements, where the fog was so thick I could barely see Holmes ahead of me. At last we cornered the figure against a brick wall, its escape blocked by a pile of refuse. Holmes raised his lantern, revealing a young man in a corporal's uniform, his face slick with sweat and his eyes wide with fear. "Please, sir," he gasped, raising his hands. "I meant no harm." "Name yourself," Holmes demanded, his voice like steel. "Corporal Daniel Webb, sir," the man stammered. "I was delivering a message for an officer. I swear it." Holmes' gaze was unrelenting, his lantern illuminating the corporal's trembling form. A message, at this hour, through a side gate, and in such haste. "Speak plainly, Corporal, or you shall find yourself in deeper trouble than a court-martial." Had nothing to do with Eldridge's death. Holmes studied him for a long moment, then stepped back. "You may go, Corporal, but know this, I shall be watching you. If you withhold anything, I will know it." Webb fled into the fog, his footsteps fading quickly. I turned to Holmes, my mind racing. "Do you believe him, Holmes? A message for Langley delivered to a man in silk. It's suspicious, surely." "Suspicious, yes," Holmes said, his eyes scanning the courtyard. "But not conclusive. Webb is a pawn, Watson, moved by a hand we have yet to identify. The tobacco scent links him to the storeroom, but his fear suggests he is not the killer, merely a witness, or perhaps a reluctant accomplice. We retraced our steps to the barracks, the fog now so dense that the gas lamps were mere pinpricks of light. Holmes examined the side gate again, noting a faint scratch on its lock, similar to the one on the storeroom door. "The same tool," he said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. "Our killer is meticulous, Watson, but not infallible. These scratches are his signature, left unwittingly." As we stood by the gate, a sudden sound, a low metallic clink, came from the shadows beyond the wall. Holmes raised a hand, signaling silence, and we crept forward, my revolver at the ready, but the fog revealed nothing, only the rustle of leaves and the distant bark of a dog. Whoever, or whatever, had made the sound was gone. Holmes' expression was grim as we returned to the alley. "We are close, Watson, but the fog hides more than the streets. Major Langley's name surfaces again, and this man in silk is a new piece in our puzzle. We must learn more of Langley's dealings, and quickly." The cab ride back to Baker Street was silent, the weight of the chase and the corporal's revelations pressing upon us. The barracks, with its iron gates and disciplined facade, seemed a fortress not only against external threats, but against the truth itself. Eldridge's death, I realized, was no isolated act but part of a deeper web, one that stretched from the Punjab to the fog-laden alleys of London. As we reached 221B, Holmes, tobacco linking him to the storeroom where Private Eldridge met his end, had set Sherlock Holmes' mind ablaze. As we sat by the fire, the red silk thread and the photograph inscribed E.M. lay on the table between us, silent witnesses to a crime that grew more tangled with each revelation. Holmes, his pipe unlit, stared into the flames, his sharp features etched with the intensity of a man wrestling with a puzzle only half-formed. "Watson," he said at last, breaking the silence, "the threads of this case, the tobacco, the silk, the scratched lock, point to a conspiracy that reaches beyond the barracks. Corporal Webb is a minor player, but Major Langley's name emerges once more. We must turn our attention to him, for if Eldridge's accusations of misconduct in India are true, Langley may hold the key to the motive." I nodded, my thoughts returning to the letter from E.M., with its plea for caution. "And the woman, Holmes? Could she be connected to Langley as well?" "Possibly," Holmes replied, rising abruptly. "But speculation without evidence is a trap for lesser minds. Tomorrow we return to the barracks. Langley's quarters must be examined, and Captain Harrow's cooperation will be essential." The next morning dawned gray and cold, the fog having retreated to a thin mist that clung to the cobblestones of Baker Street. Our hansom cab carried us back to the East End, where the barracks stood like a somber sentinel amid the bustle of Whitechapel. Captain Harrow met us at the gates, his face drawn with fatigue, as if the weight of the murders had robbed him of sleep. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice low, "I trust you've made progress. The men are restless, and rumors of a curse grow louder." "Rumors are the refuge of the idle mind," Holmes said briskly. "I require access to Major Langley's quarters, Captain. Discreetly, if possible." Harrow's eyes widened, but he nodded. "Langley is at a regimental meeting until noon. His office is in the East Wing. Follow me." The East Wing of the barracks was quieter than the bustling mess hall, its corridors lined with polished wood and portraits of past as the photograph's inscription. My heart quickened as he unfolded it, revealing words that sent a chill through me. "Tom, your accusations endanger us all. Langley knows, and he will not forgive. Cease your inquiries, I beg you, or we shall both pay the price. E.M." Holmes' eyes gleamed with triumph. "A second letter, Watson, and more explicit. Eldridge was not merely suspicious. He was a threat to Langley, and this E.M. knew it." I stared at the letter, my medical mind grappling with its implications. But why would Langley kill Eldridge? A scandal, yes, but murder? It's extreme. "Extreme measures are taken by desperate men," Holmes replied, tucking the letter into his pocket. "Langley's ambition is well known, and a scandal involving stolen funds could ruin him. But we need more than letters to prove his guilt." Holmes continued his search, his fingers probing the desk's drawers. In one he found a small notebook, its pages filled with numbers and initials, perhaps a record of transactions. One entry caught his eye. RV, 500 guineas, Punjab, 87. Holmes' brow furrowed. RV, he murmured. A name, or a code. This may be our link to the stolen funds. As we replaced the notebook, a faint creak from the corridor made us freeze. Holmes motioned for silence, his hand on the door. He opened it cautiously, revealing an empty hallway. But the air carried a faint trace of that same colonial tobacco we had detected in the storeroom. Someone was here, Holmes said, his voice low. We are not alone in our interest in Langley's secrets. Harrow, who had been standing guard outside, joined us, his face pale. Mr. Holmes, I must ask, do you suspect Major Langley of murder? I suspect everyone until the evidence clears them, Holmes replied coolly. Captain, you mentioned Eldridge's accusations were vague. Did he ever confront Langley directly? Harrow hesitated, his eyes flickering with unease. Once, about a month ago. I overheard them arguing in the mess hall after hours. Eldridge accused Langley of betraying, seemed to assess us as we entered. His uniform was immaculate, but his hands betrayed a slight tremor, and his voice when he spoke was clipped. Mr. Holmes, I understand you're investigating Eldridge's death, Langley said, his tone formal. I assure you I had no quarrel with the lad. He was a good soldier, if a bit headstrong. Holmes' gaze was unyielding. Major, Eldridge accused you of misconduct in India, specifically the theft of regimental funds. What say you to that? Langley's face darkened, but he maintained his composure. Preposterous. Eldridge was a troubled young man, prone to fantasies. I dismissed his accusations as baseless, and I had no reason to harm him. And yet, Holmes said, producing the letter from EM, this suggests otherwise. Eldridge was a threat to you, was he not? Langley's eyes widened briefly before he recovered. I know nothing of this letter. As for Eldridge, he was free to make his accusations. I have nothing to hide. Holmes studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, Major. But know this. The truth has a way of surfacing, and I shall find it. As we left the mess, I glanced at Holmes, my mind racing. Do you believe him, Holmes? He seemed shaken but not guilty. Guilt wears many masks, Watson, Holmes replied. Langley is hiding something, but whether it is murder or merely shame, I cannot yet say. The letter suggests he knew of Eldridge's intentions, and that alone makes him a suspect. Back in the courtyard, the mist had turned to a light drizzle, dampening my coat and chilling my bones. Holmes stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the barracks walls as if they might speak. The letter, the tobacco, the notebook, all pieces of a larger puzzle. Eldridge was no mere soldier. He was a man driven by justice, and it cost him his life. We must find EM and uncover what proof he held. As we climbed into our cab, the barracks faded into the mist behind us, a fortress of secrets that seemed to grow more impenetrable with each patterns. Langley is a suspect, but a man of his stature would not act alone in such a crime. We need more, something to connect the barracks to the wider world of Whitechapel. I nodded, my thoughts still tangled with the encounter in Langley's office. The notebook entry, RV, 500 guineas, Punjab, 87. Could that be our link? A name perhaps, or a code for something larger? Holmes' lips curved into a faint smile. Precisely, Watson. But we must tread carefully. The truth is often obscured by deliberate misdirection, and I suspect we are about to encounter such a ruse. The next day, as the fog lifted to reveal a gray, sullen sky, a telegram arrived from Captain Harrow, its contents urgent. A soldier had come forward with information about Eldridge's enemies, claiming they were tied to a smuggling ring operating out of a Whitechapel pub. The tip was vague but promising, and Holmes, ever eager for a lead, declared we must investigate at once. The pub, known as the Anchor and Crown, was a squat, smoke-stained building nestled in a warren of alleys near the Thames. As we pushed through its creaking door, the air hit us like a wave, thick with the scent of stale ale, tobacco, and sweat. The interior was a cacophony of laughter and shouted conversations, with soldiers in scarlet tunics mingling with dock workers and shifty-eyed locals. Gas lamps cast a dim, flickering light, and the barman, a burly man with a scarred face, eyed us warily as we entered. Holmes, with his knack for blending into any crowd, adopted the air of a casual patron, ordering 2 pints of ale to avoid suspicion. I scanned the room, my revolver a reassuring weight in my pocket, as we awaited the soldier who had sent the tip. He appeared soon enough, a lanky private named Harris, his face flushed with either drink or nerves. He slid into the booth beside us, his eyes darting to the door. "Mr. Holmes," he whispered, leaning close. "I heard you're looking into Eldridge's death. He had enemies, sir, not just in the barracks but out here. There's a gang, smugglers, they say, running opium and such through the docks. Steepled. And where is this mate of yours now?" Harris hesitated, his flush deepening. He's on leave, sir. Left for Kent yesterday. But he's honest, I swear." Holmes' expression remained impassive, but I sensed his skepticism. "Very well, Harris. Leave us now, but stay within the barracks. I may have further questions." As Harris slipped away, Holmes turned to me, his voice low. "A convenient story, Watson, and a conveniently absent witness. This smells of misdirection. A red herring meant to divert us from the barracks." We lingered in the pub, Holmes' eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of the bearded man in a fancy coat. The atmosphere grew tense as a group of soldiers at a nearby table began arguing, their voices rising over a game of cards. One, a burly corporal, slammed his fist on the table, accusing another of cheating. The commotion drew the barman's attention, and in the chaos I noticed a figure slip out the back door. A man in a dark coat, his face obscured. "Holmes," I whispered, nodding toward the door. He was already moving, his lithe form weaving through the crowd. We followed the figure into an alley, where the fog had returned, cloaking the world in gray. The man moved quickly, his footsteps muffled, but Holmes' lantern cut through the mist, revealing a glimpse of a silk-lined coat before the figure vanished around a corner. We pursued, but the alley ended in a maze of crates and refuse, and our quarry was gone. Holmes paused, his breath visible in the cold air, and examined the ground. "No footprints," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "The fog is our enemy tonight, Watson." Returning to the pub, we questioned the barman, who claimed ignorance of any smugglers but admitted to seeing Eldridge weeks earlier, drinking alone. "Kept to himself," the barman grunted. "Didn't cause trouble, but he had a look about him, like he was waiting for someone." Holmes' eyes gleamed. "Waiting for whom, I wonder?" "Watson, this smuggling tale is a distraction, and they are willing to go to great lengths to bury it." As we left Harrow's office, the barracks seemed to close in around us, its stone walls a silent witness to secrets untold. Holmes paused in the courtyard, his gaze fixed on the iron gates. "Watson, this red herring has served its purpose. It has shown us the lengths to which our adversary will go. The smuggling tale is a distraction, but it confirms that the barracks hides a network of deceit, with Langley at its center, or so someone wishes us to believe." The cab ride back to Baker Street was silent, the fog pressing against the windows like a living thing. I felt the weight of the mystery growing heavier, each clue a thread in a web that seemed to tighten around us. Holmes beside me was lost in thought, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm. The notebook, the letter, the tobacco, all point to a conspiracy, he said at last. But the smuggling story is a false trail, Watson. We must return to the barracks heart, to Langley, to E.M., and to the truth Eldridge died for. As we reached 221B, the fire's warmth did little to dispel the chill of the case. The red herring had led us astray, but Holmes' resolve was unshaken. I knew, as I settled into my chair, that the next thread we pulled might unravel the entire tapestry, or lead us deeper into the fog. Chapter 7. The Barracks Underbelly. The fog that had thwarted our pursuit in the alleys of Whitechapel seemed to linger in my mind as we returned to 221B Baker Street, its elusive tendrils mirroring the mystery that grew ever more intricate. The false lead of the smuggling ring, planted by Private Harris, had revealed not only the cunning of our adversary, but also the undercurrents of deceit within the East End Barracks. Sherlock Holmes, seated by the fire, was silent, his sharp eyes fixed on the red silk thread and the letter from E.M., as if they might yield their secrets under his relentless scrutiny. The notebook entry, RV 500 guineas, Punjab 87, lay on the table, mingling with the acrid tang of coal smoke. Captain Harrow met us at the gates, his face etched with worry. "Mr. Holmes," he said, "the men are growing more uneasy. Another soldier claims to have seen a shadow moving near the west wing last night. I fear this curse talk is spreading." "Superstition is a veil for truth," Holmes said briskly. "Captain, I require access to the barracks cellars. Every nook, every cranny. Nothing must be overlooked." Harrow hesitated, his eyes flickering with unease. "The cellars are rarely used save for old supplies. They're damp, cramped, and half forgotten. But if you think it necessary—" Holmes interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Lead on." Harrow guided us to a narrow staircase at the rear of the west wing, its steps worn smooth by time. The air grew colder as we descended, the scent of mildew and earth replacing the polish and gun oil of the upper corridors. The cellar was a labyrinth of low-ceilinged chambers, their stone walls glistening with damp. A single lantern, provided by Harrow, cast a feeble glow, its light barely reaching the corners where shadows seemed to writhe. Holmes moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the floor and walls. The cellar was cluttered with crates, barrels, and sacks of grain, many coated with dust, but others bore signs of recent disturbance. Scuff marks in the dirt, a barrel shifted slightly from its place. "Watson," Holmes said, kneeling beside a crate, "observe the dust here. It's been disturbed, And recently, someone has been moving these crates, and not for legitimate purposes. I joined him, my heart quickening as he pried open the crate's lid. Inside, beneath a layer of straw, were tightly packed bundles wrapped in oilcloth. Holmes unwrapped one, revealing a small, intricately carved statue. A jade figure of a deity, unmistakably Indian in origin. Another bundle contained web. A secret passage, Holmes said, his eyes gleaming. This explains much, Watson. The storeroom's lock was not forced from the outside. It was accessed from below, through this tunnel. Our killer entered and exited unseen. I peered into the blackness, my revolver at the ready. Shall we explore it, Holmes? Not yet, he replied, closing the trapdoor. The tunnel is a clue, but a dangerous one. We must first confirm who uses it and why. Captain, who has access to this cellar? Harrow shook his head, his face ashen. Only the quartermaster Gibbs and a few trusted men. But the cellar is rarely checked. No one comes here unless ordered. Then Gibbs must be questioned again, Holmes said. His nervousness when we first met him suggests knowledge, if not complicity. We returned to the upper levels where Harrow summoned Gibbs to his office. The quartermaster was as wiry and twitchy as before, his eyes darting to the door as Holmes began his interrogation. Huh. Mr. Gibbs, Holmes said, his voice like steel. You claimed the storeroom was secure, yet we have found evidence of a smuggling operation in the cellar below. What do you know of it? Gibbs' hands trembled and he wiped sweat from his brow. I don't know nothing, sir. I just manage the stores, that's all. If there's smuggling, it's none of my doing. Holmes leaned closer, his gaze unrelenting. And the tunnel beneath the cellar? You expect me to believe you've never seen it? Huh. Gibbs' face crumpled and he sank into a chair. I swear, sir, I didn't know about no tunnel. But I've seen Corporal Webb down there, late at night. Said he was checking supplies, but he was cagey. I didn't ask questions. Didn't want trouble. Holmes' eyes narrowed. Webb again. And did you ever see Major Langley in the cellar? Gibbs hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Once or twice, sir, but he's an officer. Has every right to inspect the stores. I thought nothing of it. Huh. Holmes dismissed Gibbs with a wave, turning to Harrow. Captain, Webb's involvement grows clearer. Eldridge had stumbled upon, and which had cost him his life. Yet the scratched lock, with its precise, angled mark, nagged at Holmes' mind. A detail that did not yet fit the pattern. As we reached 221B, Holmes lit his pipe, the glow illuminating his sharp features. Watson, he said, exhaling a plume of smoke. The barracks is a nest of vipers, and Eldridge was bitten for daring to disturb it. The tunnel and the smuggled goods are pieces of the puzzle, but the killer's identity remains just out of reach. Tomorrow, we shall pull harder at these threads. I settled into my chair, the fire's warmth doing little to dispel the chill of the case. The East End, with its fog and shadows, seemed to close in around us, and I wondered what further secrets the barracks' underbelly would yield. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. The discovery of the smuggling operation in the barracks cellar had cast a sinister light over the mystery of Private Eldridge's death. Yet the scratched lock and the elusive RV from Major Langley's notebook remained tantalizingly out of reach. The fog that had plagued our investigation seemed to mirror the opacity of the case, each clue a fleeting glimpse through the mist. As Sherlock Holmes and I sat in the familiar confines of 221B Baker Street, the fire crackling in the grate. His restless energy was palpable. The red silk thread, the letter from E.M., and the jade statue from the cellar lay on the table before us, silent witnesses to a conspiracy that grew ever more intricate. "Watson," Holmes said, his voice sharp with purpose, "the smuggling ring is the heart of this matter, but Corporal Webb is our immediate thread. His presence in the cellar, his connection to the tobacco scent, and his nocturnal errands for Langley cannot be coincidence. We must confront him directly, for he is either a pawn or a player in this deadly game." I nodded, my revolver a reassuring weight in my pocket. "And Langley?" "His notebook and the letter suggest he's involved. But is he the mastermind?" Holmes' eyes gleamed. "That remains to be seen. Langley is ambitious, but ambition alone does not make a murderer." In neat rows, their boots crunching on the gravel as Corporal Webb barked orders. His face, illuminated by the gaslight, was tense, his eyes darting as if sensing our approach. When he saw Holmes, his posture stiffened, but he maintained his composure, dismissing the recruits with a curt command. "Corporal Webb," Holmes said, his voice carrying across the courtyard, "we have matters to discuss. Your nocturnal activities, the cellar, and your connection to Major Langley require explanation." Webb's eyes widened, but he stood his ground, his hands clenched at his sides. "I don't know what you mean, sir," he said, his voice strained. "I'm a soldier, doing my duty." Holmes stepped closer, his presence commanding. "Your duty, Corporal, includes delivering messages to men in silk coats and frequenting the cellar where smuggled goods are hidden. You were in the storeroom the night Eldridge died, were you not? The tobacco scent betrays you." The recruits, lingering at the courtyard's edge, murmured among themselves, their eyes fixed on the scene. Webb's face paled, and he took a step back. I was in the cellar, yes, checking supplies for Mr. Gibbs. But I had nothing to do with Eldridge's death, I swear it." "Then explain the tobacco," Holmes pressed, his voice like steel. "The same blend was in the storeroom, on your person in the alley, and in the cellar. And the tunnel beneath. Did you use it to access the storeroom undetected?" Webb's composure cracked, his hands trembling. "I didn't kill him," he blurted. "Yes, I used the tunnel, but only to move crates, opium, artifacts, things the officers wanted hidden. I was following orders, sir, from Major Langley. He said it was for the regiment's good, to keep funds flowing after India." I caught my breath, glancing at Holmes. "Langley ordered the smuggling?" I asked. Webb nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "He didn't say much, just that it was to protect the regiment. Eldridge found out, caught me moving a crate one night. He said he'd expose it all, said he had proof hidden somewhere." Into the shadows, Harrow approached, his face grim. "Mr. Holmes, if Langley is involved in smuggling, it's a scandal that could destroy us. But murder? I can't believe it." "Belief is irrelevant," Holmes said coldly. "Evidence is what matters. Captain, arrange for us to search Langley's quarters again. There may be more to find." Harrow led us to Langley's office, now empty in the late hour. The portrait still hung askew, and Holmes wasted no time in checking the hidden recess, finding it empty. But a thorough search of the desk revealed a small key, tucked beneath a false bottom in a drawer. It was ornate, unlike the standard barracks keys, and bore a faint monogram, R.V. "The same initials as in the notebook," I said, my heart quickening. Could this be the key to Eldridge's proof? Possibly, Holmes replied, pocketing the key. But it may also unlock something more dangerous. Langley's involvement in the smuggling is clear, but the murder, I am not yet convinced he wielded the blade. As we searched further, Holmes' attention turned to a locked cabinet in the corner. The key fit perfectly, revealing a collection of papers, bills of sale for Indian artifacts, coded ledgers, and a single knife with a monogrammed handle, its blade polished, but too short to match the wound described by Harrow. Not the murder weapon, Holmes said, but a sign of Langley's secrets. This knife is ceremonial, likely a keepsake from India. The faint scent of tobacco lingered in the cabinet, the same colonial blend that had haunted us since the storeroom. Langley smokes this blend, Holmes said, his voice low. Or someone close to him does. The web tightens, Watson, but the spider remains hidden. We left the office, the barracks now quiet save for the distant tramp of a sentry. Harrow, visibly shaken, promised to keep Langley under observation. If he's guilty, he said, I'll see justice done, Mr. Holmes. But if not, we must clear his name. Justice will be served, Holmes replied, his tone resolute. But we are not yet at the end of this thread itself. And I knew our next step would bring us closer to a truth that might be as dangerous as the fog-laden streets of the East End. Chapter 9. The Final Clue. The confrontation with Corporal Webb had peeled back another layer of the mystery surrounding Private Eldridge's death. Yet the heart of the matter remained shrouded in the fog of deceit that seemed to permeate the East End Barracks. The smuggled goods in the cellar, the monogrammed key marked RV, and the letter from EM all pointed to a conspiracy that stretched beyond the barracks' stone walls. As Sherlock Holmes and I returned to 221B Baker Street, the weight of these discoveries pressed upon me. Each clue a thread in a tapestry that grew ever more intricate. Holmes, however, was invigorated, his mind racing to connect the pieces that would unravel the truth. We sat by the fire, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill of the case. Holmes spread the evidence before us, the red silk thread, the letter warning Eldridge of Major Langley's knowledge, the notebook with its cryptic RV, 500 guineas, Punjab, 87 entry, and the ornate key found in Langley's desk. His fingers drummed a restless rhythm as he stared at the objects, his eyes gleaming with the intensity of a man on the cusp of revelation. Watson, he said at last, his voice low and measured. We have been led through a maze of misdirection, smuggling rings, ambitious officers, and whispered curses. Yet one detail eludes us: the scratched lock in the storeroom. Its peculiar angle suggests a tool of rare design, and until we understand its origin, the killer's identity remains just beyond our grasp. I frowned, recalling the faint scratch on the storeroom lock. Could it be a military tool, Holmes? Something used in India, perhaps, given the smuggling connection? Holmes shook his head. Unlikely. The scratch precision indicates a specialized instrument, not standard issue. It is a clue we have overlooked, and I suspect it holds the key to the entire puzzle. Officials in colonial service. I suspect our killer is no ordinary soldier, but a professional, hired to silence Eldridge. Holmes' words sent a chill through me. A hired assassin. But who would hire such a man? That, Holmes said, snapping the notebook shut, is what we must confirm. The key marked RV suggests a figure of influence, possibly someone Eldridge threatened with his accusations. We return to the barracks tonight. The journey back to the East End was silent, the cab's wheels clattering over cobblestones as the city's gas lamps flickered through the thinning fog. The barracks loomed ahead, its iron gates a stark reminder of the secrets hidden within. Captain Harrow was absent, attending a regimental dinner, so we were met by a nervous quartermaster, Gibbs, who led us to the storeroom once more. Visual scene. The storeroom at night. Holmes examining the lock with a magnifying glass. The chalk outline of Eldridge's body stark against the floor. Holmes knelt by the storeroom door, his magnifying glass trained on the lock scratch. "Here," he said, pointing to the angled mark. The tool was not a standard pick, but a tension wrench with a hooked end, designed for high-security locks. Such tools are rare, used by operatives trained in espionage or covert operations. I felt a prickle of unease. Espionage? You mean a government agent? Possibly, Holmes replied, rising. Eldridge's accusations of stolen funds in India may have threatened someone powerful, someone with access to such operatives. The initials RV may be our key. We descended to the cellar where the trapdoor to the tunnel lay hidden. Holmes lifted it, the lantern's light revealing the narrow passage below. "The killer entered here," he said, using the tunnel to bypass the locked door. But the scratch suggests they worked from the storeroom side, picking the lock to exit after the deed. As we explored the cellar, Holmes' attention turned to a dusty crate in a corner, its lid slightly ajar. He opened it, revealing more smugglers. The note confirmed E.M. as Eldridge's confidant, likely his sister, entrusted with his evidence. The assassin, Holmes continued, was a professional, trained in lock-picking and silent killing. The tobacco scent, the silk thread, these are marks of a man of refinement, likely a former colonial operative working for Vane. We left the cellar, the papers tucked safely in Holmes' coat. The barracks seemed to close in around us, its walls heavy with the weight of betrayal. "Watson," Holmes said as we stepped into the courtyard. "Vane is the spider at the center of this web." The lock scratch was our final clue, pointing to a hired killer whose skills betray his employer's influence. The cab ride back to Baker Street was tense, the papers a dangerous burden. Holmes' mind was already racing ahead, planning the confrontation that would bring Vane to justice. "We have the proof," he said, "but Vane is powerful. We must act swiftly, lest he strike again." As we reached 221B, the fire's glow did little to warm the chill of our discovery. The final clue, the scratched lock, had unlocked the truth, but the path to justice was fraught with peril. I knew Holmes would not rest until Vane faced the consequences of his crimes, and I steeled myself for the battle ahead. Chapter 10. The Deduction. The discovery of the incriminating papers in the barracks cellar had brought us to the precipice of truth. Yet the weight of that truth hung heavy as Sherlock Holmes and I returned to 221B Baker Street. The fog that had plagued our investigation had lifted, revealing a starry sky above London, as if the heavens themselves sensed the clarity we were about to achieve. The papers, detailing Sir Reginald Vane's illicit dealings, lay safely in Holmes' possession, alongside the red silk thread, the letter from E.M., and the monogrammed key. These fragments of evidence, painstakingly gathered, were now the threads Holmes would weave into a tapestry of justice. We sat by the fire, its crackling warmth a bulwark against the chill of the case. Holmes had summoned Captain Harrow to Baker Street, insisting that the final reckoning must take place in our rooms, where the truth Van's instrument, and the lock scratch betrays his method. We have all we need. A sharp rap at the door announced Captain Harrow's arrival. He entered, his greatcoat still damp from the night air, his face a mask of apprehension. "Mr. Holmes," he said, "I trust you have answers. The regiment is in turmoil, and Major Langley grows more defensive by the hour." "Sit, Captain," Holmes said, gesturing to a chair. "You shall have your answers, and justice for Private Eldridge." Holmes began, his voice steady and commanding. The murder of Private Thomas Eldridge was no random act, but the culmination of a conspiracy rooted in greed and betrayal. Let us begin with the scene. A locked storeroom, a single stab wound to the heart, no weapon found, and a peculiar scratch on the lock. These were our first clues, suggesting a killer of skill and precision. He held up the red silk thread. This, found in the storeroom, was our first hint of an outsider. It is not military issue, but from a gentleman's garment, likely a coat, as described by Corporal Webb. The tobacco scent, rich and colonial, further linked the storeroom to Webb's nocturnal errands and the cellar's smuggling operation. Harrow leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Holmes. "But the smuggling, how does it connect to Eldridge's death?" Holmes produced the letter from E.M. This letter, found in Major Langley's office, warned Eldridge that Langley knew of his accusations regarding stolen regimental funds in India. Eldridge, a man of honor, had uncovered evidence of theft, but the true culprit was not Langley but Sir Reginald Vane, a War Office official who profited from the smuggling ring. I interjected, my medical curiosity stirred. "But the murder, Holmes, how was it done in a locked room?" Holmes' lips curved into a faint smile. The storeroom was not as secure as it seemed. In the cellar below we found a trapdoor leading to a tunnel, allowing the killer to enter and exit unseen. The lock scratch, made by a specialized tension wrench, was the key. Such tools are used by operatives trained in covert operations, often employed by men like Vane to silence threats. In India, where their father, a regimental clerk, was disgraced for Vane's crimes. Holmes leaned back, steepling his fingers. The assassin, hired by Vane, was a professional, likely a former colonial operative, skilled in lockpicking and silent killing. The tobacco scent and silk thread mark him as a man of refinement. Possibly the man in silk Webb described. He entered the storeroom via the tunnel, stabbed Eldridge with a single, precise thrust, and exited, locking the door behind him with his specialized tool. The scratch was his only mistake, a trace of his method. I felt a chill, despite the fire's warmth. But why not take the evidence Eldridge had? Vane believed it was in the barracks, Holmes replied. He did not know Eldridge had sent copies to Emily. The other deaths, Corporal Baxter and Private Malone, were likely earlier attempts to silence those who knew too much. Baxter's fall and Malone's drowning were no accidents but murders, disguised to maintain Vane's secrecy. Harrow's voice was hoarse. And Langley? Was he involved? Langley was a pawn, Holmes said. He facilitated the smuggling, perhaps under duress, but he did not wield the blade. His notebook and the ceremonial knife suggest complicity, but Vane was the architect. Langley's ambition made him vulnerable, but his fear of exposure kept him silent. Holmes rose, his presence commanding. "Captain, I have sent word to Scotland Yard. Inspector Lestrade will arrest Vane tonight based on the evidence we've provided. The assassin remains at large, but with Vane's downfall, his network will unravel. Harrow stood, his face a mix of relief and resolve. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. The regiment owes you a debt. But what of the men? This scandal will shake them. The truth, though painful, purifies, Holmes said. The barracks will heal, Captain. As will Emily Marwood, who can now honor her brother's sacrifice. As Harrow left to coordinate with Lestrade, I sat back, the weight of the case lifting slightly. Holmes, I said,